The basis for our sermon this morning is the gospel reading. Our message is titled, The Last Word. Ironically, to get to the last word, we're actually backing up from last week. Last week, Pastor Steve talked about the love of God the Father through that parable of not the unmerciful farmers, remember, it's the unmerciful tenants. We're avoiding the taking down of farmers. But this week we're backing up. That was Luke chapter 20. This is Luke chapter 19 to get to the last word. Now, our gospel reading is a very popular, this recording of Jesus entering, or on his way, to Jerusalem is recorded in all four gospels. But Luke, we're going to see this morning, Luke records some different parts of it. As that great historian that Luke was, he captures some things that the other gospel writers didn't. So, in our text, Jesus had just gotten done preaching the parable of the talents. And after saying this, he keeps on going to Jerusalem, and he tells the disciples, as they get near to Bethany and Bethphage, he tells them to go into the village and find a colt and untie it, and tells them to expect the obvious. The owners might have something to say about this, and tells them what to say. And just like Jesus said, it happened. And Jesus gets on the colt. Now, this isn't a magnificent war horse. This isn't one of the Budweiser stallions. This is a little colt full of a donkey. Jesus is making a point here, and the disciples don't really get it, but that's okay. He's patient with them, and he's patient with us too. So the disciples actually start off by throwing their cloaks on the colt, and the rest of the disciples follow, throwing their cloaks on the ground before him, as sort of a way that you would praise a victorious king entering into his capital. That's not quite what we're going to see over the next week. And here's where Luke keeps going, where the other gospel writers leave off. Luke has done his research, he keeps on going, and he ties the praises of the crowd. He actually records them and connects them to the Old Testament. And he also captures the reaction of the Pharisees. The Pharisees say, "This is too much, Jesus. You're going too far this time." And he says, they tell Jesus in so many words, "Tell your disciples to knock it off." And then Jesus ends in verse 40 with these words, "I tell you, if these were silent, the stones would cry out." I don't know how you felt when Pastor Steve read that just now, but when I heard that, I almost wanted to go, "Yeah, Jesus, you go. You got him." We like the last word. Remember the catchphrase from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Is that your final answer? Having the right last word could mean fortune and fame. Or it can be something as little. It doesn't have to be a big, hyped-up reality show. It could be something as little as a little argument about something that really doesn't matter in the broad spectrum of life. But afterwards, if you were able to convince the other person, you kind of walk away with that smug feeling, don't you? I was able to convince him. I got the last word. So we're looking today at Jesus' last word in our gospel reading. Now, we can actually take Jesus' words at face value. That is one way to look at them. And it's valid because the Bible, in both the Old and New Testaments, talks about how God created the heavens and the earth to give him glory, to give him praise. It's right here in Psalm 19. David reminds us, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. So David gives us this image of the heavens and the earth praising God in such a way that it's unavoidable, that every single living creature hears. And Paul, one of our church's greatest missionaries, reflects the same thing as he's talking about how the earth reveals who God is in Romans chapter 1. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Creation indeed praises God. But if you take another look at that, verse 40, creation is not the last word for giving praise to God. Listen to the first half of what Jesus said in verse 40. I tell you, if these were silent, the stones would cry out. The stones, the earth, that's plan B. What's plan A for giving God's praise? What's God's greatest creation, created in his own image to reflect him to the world and to give praise to him? It's mankind. It's the disciples who are praising him. It's you and me today. Think about the past week. Have your last words always been praising to God? I know mine always haven't. Have you had those arguments, those moments? You wish you could kind of just take that back, undo, click the undo button just like you have on Microsoft Word. Just kind of blot it out, get rid of it, and just not have to deal with it anymore? Or maybe your last words were of a different nature. Maybe they were words where someone said, "What are you going to church for? What's you waking up so early on Sunday morning?" And you kind of backed out and said, "I don't know. Well, that's what we always did." Someone older and wiser than myself said, "I always keep my words nice and sweet because I never know which ones I'll have to eat." Our last words don't always work out like we plan. And sometimes they even deny God. But that's not the last word for you and me today. Actually, to get to the real last word, we're going to go to the beginning of the gospel reading. Where was Jesus headed? He was going up to Jerusalem, just like we sang a few moments ago. Lead me to the cross of Jesus. Our last words, our hurtful last words, would lead not to those being our last word in our life, but rather would become the last words of Jesus' earthly life. Jesus took all of our sins, all of our hurtful last words upon himself at the cross and died for them, took them all upon himself, and they are taken away forever. When Jesus said, "It is finished," I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself. It's still Palm Sunday. We're jumping a little bit to Good Friday, but trust me, there's plenty left for Good Friday. When Jesus said it is finished, he said that about all of our sin, all of our last words, everything you and I have done wrong.